run through the second half of this a lot more quickly, because there's quite a lot more slides to go through. This is just from a website, because we're not allowed to use photographs here that aren't our own. Infringes on copyright. I can link you up to websites. So these are the Shang Dynasty oracle bones. And this is the earliest archaeological evidence of Chinese religion. These would be questions written onto the bone. And in the back of the bone there would be two slots that have been filed out with metal files for a red hot iron bar to be put through. And so first the priest would inscribe the question, then two red hot bars would be put in it, and it would cause so much heat the bone would crack. These are cracks, these are cracks, these are cracks. And it would then be the job of the priest to read the cracks. That sounds obscene. Read the cracks and work out what it meant. And the emperor of China would do this for almost every decision made. And from the bones that have been dug up, the thing that he most often asked about is a particular ancestor satisfied with the sacrifices that we offered? Would be the most common thing. And this is proof, if you like, that already in the Shang dynasty there was a belief in ancestors living after death in a different plane that had powers that humans didn't have that could help you predict the future. Will I win the war tomorrow? What should I plant wheat or barley, etc. And there was also a hierarchical system, because the ancestors of the emperor would of course be the emperor in the spirit world. The ancestor of a general would be a general in the spirit world, etc., etc., etc. Now a lot of these bones were dug up, which had been used, and had the red hot metal put through them, but it had no writing on them. And so archaeologists have made their best guess, and that is that everybody used these for divination, even if they were illiterate or didn't have enough money to employ a priest, they still used this for divination. So even at the lowest level of society, there was already religion. Around the Shang dynasty, they divided the world into different layers. You had the human world, you had a world of ghosts, which would either be good, which would be an ancestor, or malevolent, as in ghosts that wanted to cause you or your family harm. And an ancestor, if correctly buried and correctly sacrificed to, would bring his descendants blessings, his or her descendants blessings. And if they weren't sacrificed to properly or buried properly, they would get mad and become a hungry ghost, and could then bring bad luck to a family. So this aspect of religion was set up very, very, very early in Chinese history. You want to close all the tabs. I cannot believe how difficult this is to work and think. When it's not working properly. Come on. I'm just going to go back to here. Okay, so I'll let you read through this yourself. It gives the very, very fundamentals of the history, the early history. Everybody through that? So also these two references at the bottom are the best introductions that there are to Chinese religion. They're both quite thin books, about a centimetre thick, and they're easy reads. And if you read these two books, they'll give you a huge introduction to all aspects of contemporary and the history of Chinese religion. Adler and Thompson. Any questions about these?
Explain I don't understand the pole ghost.
Okay, I'll explain to you what I've been told by a Taoist priest fairly recently. I said to a Taoist priest exactly what you said to me. Can you please explain the hun and the po of the soul? And the Taoist explanation is that everybody has 3 hun and 7 po.
3 and 7 4.
Yeah. And this is the official Taoist explanation. It's not necessarily what people practice, but it's the official explanation. And the 3 hun are your spirit. They use the word spirit and soul interchangeably. And after you die, one of them goes down to the underworld to be punished for your sins while you were alive. One of them hovers around the grave, and the other one remains up in heaven. And this is contactable through an ancestral tablet. And the 7 po, more like personality traits and personality characteristics that develop between the age of 0 and 16. Other schools of Taoism say between the age of 0 and 4 these develop. And they're basically your personality. Are you a humorous guy? Are you a bad guy? Are you a friendly guy? Are you a smart guy? Are you a thief? Are you a murderer? Are you a businessman? Are you a sportsman? Etc., etc., etc. And when you die, these die with you. The hun that goes to the underworld after being punished for their sins, now this is when you get into the realms of folk religion as opposed to orthodox Taoism, is then reborn. And the rebirth depends upon the act and the former life. This is obviously something which has been taken from Buddhist cosmology in the form of karma and introduced into the general mixture of Chinese folk religion. There is no explanation from anyone that after this hun gets reincarnated, where the other 2 huns suddenly materialize from. Taoists say they materialize from the infinite Tao, but there's no obviously actual explanation anyone is certain of. They just say you have 3 and 7. One of the papers for reading was about the nature of the soul, and in that he concluded that in practice people act as if there's only 3 parts of the soul, not 10. I think it's quite a kind system of belief as compared to the Western system. So in the Western system, if you're a bad guy and you go to hell, you live there forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, burning in punishment forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. It just seems very unkind. With the Chinese concept, they don't really have a hell, it's an underworld, not a hell. It exists, in theory, underneath mountains, lakes, rivers and oceans. And after 49 days of punishment, you're given a cup of forgetfulness. And you drink the tea, and you forget about all your punishments, and you forget about your past life. And then you're reincarnated, so you're kind of given another chance to progress and elevate yourself. Any questions? Okay, a subject I find interesting is the anthropomorphization of the gods. It's the longest word I know in English. Anthropomorphization, I can almost pronounce, means giving something not human a human image. So in the slide where I showed you the big rock and the statue of Mr. Blackstone, that is an example of anthropomorphization. So here you have the little deities. In traditional Taoism, they say that deities are there to help you focus your concentration. In Orthodox Taoism, there is no deity living inside the statue. It's just there to help you focus. But in practice, when anthropologists came along and went to temples, or if you go to temples, you'll see people worshipping the statues as if there is a god inside the statue. They will talk to the statue. When you use divination blocks, you give your name, your address, your date of birth, where you were born, etc., 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 so that the deity knows who they're talking to. And there's different ways of explaining why you have human-shaped deities. It depends who you ask. The first one is Chinese system, as mentioned, has a replica of the earthly structure, social structure, in the spirit world. So you have an emperor in heaven, you have an emperor in China. You have generals and officials in heaven, you have generals and officials in China, all the way down to the kitchen god, and you have a kitchen in your home. And so by having a human image, it makes it easier to communicate with them. It makes it easier to relate to the deities rather than to an invisible deity. It also makes them replaceable, because if you have an invisible god, how can you get rid of it? Like, well, I don't like God, I want to get rid of him. Right? How can you do that? You can't. He's invisible. With the Judeo-Christian Abrahamic God is invisible. As soon as you make the God visible, he becomes replaceable. If you don't like him, you can kick him out, you can get another one. In Taiwan, when the national lottery was first introduced, people went crazy asking their deity, number one, will it come up this Friday? Number two, will it come up this Friday? For divination blocks, no. Number three, no. Number four, yes, okay. Number four. And they would do this. And of course, when they didn't win the lottery, they get really, really pissed off. And this happened when I was in Taiwan on my first trip. And it was not uncommon to see 2 or 3 statues a week that had been smashed and thrown out of the garbage. And people would, let's say, have a Tudegong statue, Tudegong the earth god. It didn't give them the right numbers, so they would smash it and go, okay, right, forget you, you're no good, I'll go and get a Matsu and worship Matsu and ask her for the numbers. And there's people with collections of several thousand deities they rescue from the garbage. So giving them an image, if you like, makes them replaceable. It also means you can control them. If God is invisible, how can you control it? You can't say, hey, if you don't do what I want, I'm going to punish you. Yeah, if it's visible, you can threaten it. Interesting concept, yeah? Very interesting concept. Professor Hansen, Changing Gods in Medieval China, has lots and lots of stories, similar to the Taiwan example of smashing the gods about the lottery, but his story is a bit more poetic. The magistrate in the jail, Song Dynasty, there was an area, and it hadn't rained for 2.5, 3 months, and a big drought, they needed rain. So the magistrate walked into the temple, takes the main deity, takes them away, puts them in prison. It says to the deity, look, if you don't make it rain in 3 days, I'm going to burn down your temple, then you've got nowhere to live. Okay. Now, this is a true story, it's documented in history. So, you can control the gods. Another one, the bandits in the river. They're a group of bandits, wanted to attack and burn down a town and rape all the women and enslave all the children, as bandits tend to do. And they said to their god, as I always said, can we go and rape and pillage and destroy this town? And the god said no. So they asked the god again, hey, we don't like that, can we go and destroy this town? He's like, no. And they said, look, if you don't say yes, we're going to drown you. So they asked again, and the god said no. So they threw the god in the river. And they got themselves a new god who said yes. Okay, so these are historical examples. Okay, the relationship between people and their gods is contractual rather than one of supplication. Offerings are made for favors. This is from a contemporary anthropologist, Margaret Chan, who wrote a paper, Image Worship in Chinese Popular Religion. I'm not sure if it's been published yet, so I'm not sure if it's available online. Brilliant, brilliant paper. And that's one of the big differences between Chinese and Western religion. In Chinese religion, you make deals with your gods. You might offer to sacrifice a pig. You might offer to burn a certain amount of ghost money. My personal research is into Chinese spirit mediums, and very often people become spirit mediums because they were sickly when they were a child. The doctor at hospital said, look, sorry, your son's going to die by the age of 14. And the grandma will go to the temple and say, hey, God, whatever, God, please, please help my child. If my son survives, he will be a spirit medium for you when he grows up. About 50% of spirit mediums started off like that because their parent or grandparent made a deal with deity. So you can bargain with gods in Chinese religion. Okay, any questions? You can interrupt any time for questions, by the way. Okay, so that's a very, very, very brief introduction to the Chinese belief system of worship, the Chinese historical development. It's very brief. People have written whole books about this, so just an introduction. Now we're going to move on to specifically Taiwan, religion in Taiwan. Once again, I'll let you read through that. Okay, so to summarize this, before people came to Taiwan, generally they'd lived in the same ancestral village or around an ancestral hall in some part of China for many, many, many generations. People emigrated to Taiwan. They couldn't bring the ancestral hall with them because it belonged to an entire community or an entire surname, clan surname. And so instead of having religion based around an ancestral hall, religion would be based around the temple. And the temple was there because gods have more power than ancestors, and because this really was frontier land, like the American Wild West, but about the same period of history actually. They needed the gods to protect them as much as possible. And so you had a culture of temples rather than ancestral halls. Generally, each village would have its own temple, and the most common deity would have been TW-khai. And then something happened. You had Taiwan's economic miracle, I guess you've learned about already, and this changed the whole structure of Taiwan, including the religious structure. And a small group of temples, generally the oldest temples of the most popular deities, which would include Nanquanshen Temple in Tainan, for example, or Wangye, Royal Lord's Temple, started producing fenling. That means making a statue the same as their statues in their temple, and another temple will come along and say, hey, we want your god. It's okay, put this statue in our temple for 6 months, let it absorb that spiritual, the ling energy from our deity, and you take it to your own temple. And this started forming links and bonds between temples. And now some of the biggest temples have over 1,000, some even over 1,500 branch temples, where people have taken a statue there, left it there, then taken it back. And this has completely changed religious culture. Lin Mei Rong was a local anthropologist, and she talked about belief circles. And the belief circle has become very, very big because Nanquanshen is in Tainan County, One of the spirit mediums I'm researching at the moment lives in a small apartment block in Yonghe, and her main deity is the same deity as in Nanquanshen Temple, and that is a deity that possesses her. So she is a part of this belief circle from a larger temple. This is something exclusively Taiwanese as far as I know. You don't really have this in China. You do have religious pilgrimage, but it's not the same structure as you have in Taiwan. It's certainly different from Singapore or anywhere else I've been. The photographs are both taken in a Matsu temple, where people have brought back the statues. They do it once a year. They bring back the statues, and this is actually a censer where they burn incense, and incense catches fire and flares up. They pass the statues through the incense to purify them and also to recharge their energy. So this is Nanquanshen Temple in Tainan County. This is their royal lords. And these royal lords actually arrive on a boat from mainland China, because these are plague deities and they're worshipped to get rid of plague. These are probably now the most common deity in Taiwan apart from TW-khai. And that's because of the way that worship circles have expanded. And as mentioned there, the size of a temple largely depends on transportation. When there was only a small dirt road going to Nanquanshen Temple, the only people that went there were local villagers. It was a very small temple. They built a bigger dirt road all the way to Tainan, and people from Tainan came. They worshipped the deities, they got some good luck, they got what they wanted, they donated some money, the temple would expand. And when the government built a big tarmac road, suddenly it became a huge pilgrimage center, and it's still getting bigger and bigger. It's another one definitely worth visiting. Okay, so pantheon. Pantheon is the word we use for a group of deities. It's called a pantheon. There is a Christian pantheon which would include all the saints, for example. There's, in Chinese religion, you have a Buddhist pantheon of Buddhist deities, a Taoist pantheon of Taoist deities. You have the official pantheon. The official pantheon was controlled by the Emperor of China. And the Emperor of China could deify someone, make someone into a deity after they died. The Emperor of China, as he was supposed to be a living god, could promote people inside the pantheon, or demote people, or even kick someone out of the pantheon. Which raises a really interesting question. After the fall of the last Emperor of China, the official pantheon didn't close, but it could no longer evolve. There was no longer an emperor to promote or remove deities. And then you have the popular religious pantheon, or folk pantheon, which would include deities like Mr. Blackstone and all the other deities, unofficial. Any deity can become a part of this bigger pantheon. The example I'm using here is of WHEI-MING, very interesting deity. WHEI-MING is a female deity. Some of you may know that WHEI-MING started off as a man. WHEI-MING, oh, you didn't know? It's interesting. WHEI-MING started as a man. WHEI-MING's original name was T.W-khai and was a deity a male deity from India. When T.W-khai first entered Chinese religion, entered Buddhism, it was through the Third Buddhist Council, which took place in Kashmir. It is from here that Buddhism spread into China. Over about 1,000 years, if I can find the name of the book, it's in the library here, there's a book about WHEI-MING, a big thick book, giving all the details. But WHEI-MING slowly transformed into a female deity of compassion. That transformation was complete by about the 11th century. And WHEI-MING was purely a Buddhist deity, the Buddhist pantheon. At a certain period, Buddhism was becoming more popular than Taoism. And in dynastic China, Buddhism and Taoism were always in competition for royal patronage. At different times, the emperor said, okay, we don't want any Taoists. We'll knock down the Taoist temples and persecute Taoist priests. At other times, they do the same for Buddhist monasteries because they were too rich or too powerful for political or religious reasons. So the two were always vying for in competition with each other for public recognition and popularity. And this relates to, for example, Matsu. Matsu, as you know, Empress of Heaven. A lot of historians have speculated that Matsu became promoted to the Empress of Heaven from a very, very, very local deity because the Taoists wanted someone to compete with Guanyin. Because Guanyin was this beautiful goddess of compassion. Your parents are ill, oh, go to Guanyin. You want to have a baby, oh, go to Guanyin. You have a problem, go to Guanyin. And so the Taoists wanted someone also that was compassionate. Now, I'm not stating this as a matter of fact, it's just what some historians use to explain how Matsuri increased in power. Now, Guanyin herself was also adopted into Taoism as this deity, which is now a male deity again in Taoism. And this is Da Shi Ye, who's basically the king of ghosts. Whenever you have a festival that involves inviting ghosts to the festival, you usually have a paper or plastic effigy of this deity. So at the end of the festival, Da Shi Ye will make sure all of the ghosts leave, either back to the underworld or thus to a different area. And then the deity is burnt, so the deities themselves can go back to where they came from, back to heaven.
Could you maybe explain to me, because I have a little bit of trouble about Buddhism as I know it, it's only Buddha, right?
No.
And that's why I'm a little confused now with Taoism and Buddhism. How do you, what's the real difference between them?
Okay. Good question. The original Buddhism. Buddha was from India. And originally it was just an Indian religion. Buddha was a meditation teacher, and after he died, his main disciple, whose name was Ananda, had memorized all the teachings of Buddha in Buddha's lifetime, according to the legend. And these teachings were written down and form the basis of Buddhism. It was a philosophical path to enlightenment. It was based on the Four Noble Truths, which, put very simply, are there is suffering, there is a way out of suffering. The way out of suffering is called the Noble Eightfold Path, and if you follow the Eightfold Path, you'll stop suffering. Simple as that. Then you have the Eightfold Path, which includes right words, right action, right thought, right wisdom, right concentration, right livelihood. I can't remember the other two, but they're similar things. It's a philosophical system whereby if you follow this system, you reduce your desires. You reduce the number of bad things you do and increase the number of good things you do. And by doing this, Buddha said that eventually you can reach enlightenment, because once you have no desire, you have no attachment. When you have no attachment and no desire, your mind isn't wandering in thoughts of tomorrow and regrets about yesterday. It can focus in the moment. And when you're fully in the moment, you become enlightened. You understand the true nature of reality. You realize that everything is an illusion. Okay, so that was the original Buddhism. Around the 1st century AD, there were obviously people who weren't satisfied with this and thought, well, there's got to be something else. And they convened a big council in what is now modern-day Kashmir. It's called the Third Buddhist Council. At the time, Kashmir had a Hellenistic culture. Alexander the Great, when he invaded Asia, got as far as the Bias River, which is around Manali in Himachal Pradesh. And Manali is the north of that, so that was all a part of Alexander the Great's Greek Empire. And when they convened their Third Buddhist Council, it didn't just include Buddhist monks, it also included philosophers, the local philosophers. And the local philosophers were following Greek philosophy. They also worshipped the Greek gods. And they had a whole system of worshipping different gods for different things. don't ask me about Greek mythology, it's not my subject. I'm the Chinese religion guy, so I don't know much about that side of it. Anyway, the council wasn't a two-day council, it lasted for years and years and years. And during this period, they actually wrote a whole bunch of new scriptures, including the Lotus Scripture, the Diamond Sutra, the Heart Sutra, all of the sutras which have become the soul of Chan or Zen Buddhism, the center of it. And then they, I don't like to use the word invented or created, but from that evolved the concept of a bodhisattva. A bodhisattva is someone who has almost attained enlightenment, but just before they become enlightened, they say, I don't want to become enlightened, I'd rather come and help humans and stop their suffering. And these became people like WHEI-MING. There's a whole variety of bodhisattvas. Wenshu Pusa, Guanshi Yin Pusa, Puxian Pusa, Dijang Wong Pusa. There's a whole group of different bodhisattvas. And in Chinese religion, these were anthropomorphized. They made images of them, and they became worshipped as deities. And this is the Buddhism that went into China. It's very, very different from the original Buddhism. In the original Buddhism, there were no deities to worship. There were no bodhisattvas. There was no Lotus Sutra, Diamond Sutra. There were no Western paradise and Western heavens. There was no enlightenment through repeating Ame Dofo. This was all invented far more recently. So when we're talking about Chinese Buddhism, we're talking about the Buddhism that evolved from the third Buddhist council in the 1st century AD in Kashmir. And that is not to say that it is higher or lower, or better or worse, or to make any moral judgment about which kind of Buddhism is better in any way whatsoever. I'm just giving you the historical bones of it. The most recent form of Buddhism is Tibetan Buddhism, which is only about 700 or 800 years old, and that is the furthest away from the original Buddhism. Once again, that doesn't mean it's better or worse. They would argue, well, since Buddha we've had 1,800 years to improve on his meditation techniques. We're far more advanced, we've progressed. This is real Buddhism. You know, Buddha was too old-fashioned. So it's not a judgment on what's better or worse. When we're talking about Chinese Buddhism, we're talking about this specific kind. And that's where you have the deities and the pantheon. And the pantheon's obviously got bigger and expanded because there's no limit to the number of people that can become enlightened, or not become enlightened to become a bodhisattva, or a lower deity. Bodhisattva's right up there. You also have divas, you have 6 different layers of reality, and one of them is low-level deities. Is that okay? No, cool. Okay, so going back to the power of politicians and emperors to promote deities, I'll let you read this. There's 2 pages of it. It's just talking about how Lin Moniang, who was a very, very simple peasant girl whose father was a fisherman, became the Empress of Heaven. So I'll let you read through this. It's on 2 different slides. I can't explain the history of this because I'm not a historian. There's a website called ChinatownOlogy.com, and someone on Chinatownology has put down every single promotion of Matsu, and I think there's something like 70 of them. I can't remember the exact number. These are just the main ones. And you can also find political explanations for most of the different promotions. Okay? So in Chinese religion, people can move up, they can also move down the pantheon. If a deity is not worshipped for a long enough period of time, they lose their power. Because deities are given power by people worshipping them. So if people stop worshipping them, they lose their power. If you find a photograph of a temple 100 years ago, you might well find a deity that is no longer worshipped now. Because people stop worshipping that deity, they've now disappeared from the pantheon. So deities do come, they do go.
Where does the name Matsu come from? Is it explained?
Matsu. Someone Taiwanese? Hello? Matsu, the word Matsu. Can you explain that? Mother, Su? Can you explain the name? Okay.
Because you give the name Mo, yeah, or something like that. But then
Original
Matsu.
Lin Morning. Yeah. Okay, I'm afraid you have to look that one up online. I can't answer that one for you.
Just like mother is
Yeah, Ma is mother and Su is
Ancestors.
okay, mother, ancestor. It's just become a very popular title, so I don't know the etymology of it. Okay. Okay, so there's a lot of purely Taiwanese phenomena that have evolved in Taiwan. One of my favorite is the money god temples. Has anyone been to a money god temple? No?
Is it the one where you pray for prosperity and success like that? Like it has like a million lanterns on the top?
Okay. Different kinds of money god temples. Throughout Chinese history there have been money god temples, temples where you pray to a god of wealth, which is called the Saishan. But a recent thing that's happened in Taiwan since 1950 is a temple where you can actually go and ask the deity for lucky money. And if the deity gives you the money, you take the money home, and then you come back and you pay interest on it later. So it's very, very, very Taiwanese. The first one is Shiliao village in Angang. Originally it was a local Tudigong temple. The photo on the left is a deity of Tudigong. In 1730 they added another deity which is a rock about this big that is in the shape of a human. So they made it close and it became deified. In the 1930s it's a small farming community. So there were 2 or 3 landlords and a lot of people working the farms. And the landlords wanted to get rich, so they decided to go to Taipei and invest in business. And they didn't know what they were doing and they lost all their money. And so they went back to their village, they went to the temple, and they went to the temple committee and said, could we please have some money that's been blessed by our gods so we can go back to Taipei and get rich? And the temple committee of 12 people discussed it and said, sure, no problem, we'll give you some money on the condition you come back within 1 year and repay the money. And so the landlords went to Taipei, they started successful businesses, as luck would have it. A year later they went back and repaid the money. And of course all the local villagers heard about it, like, whoa, we want some of this. So they'd go and borrow some money, and then people from the next village would borrow some money. And by the late 1940s, there were so many people borrowing money, it became ritualized. That means there was a set method of borrowing money from the temple. You didn't just go there and say, hey, I'm Mr. Wong, please lend me some money. It became a system where anyone could come along from any village. You didn't have to know them to borrow money. And I went there, I spoke to the manager of the temple, and he was a very young teenager when the first landlord came to borrow money from the temple. And he actually remembers them giving the money to the first person. It was a really interesting interview. And he's now the manager of the temple. And he said last year they made 200 million Taiwan dollars profit. That's a huge amount of money. That's huge. That's massive, massive profit. And the way it works is very simple. You use the divination box and you say to TW-khai and the other deities in the temple, will you give me some lucky money? And if the first time you get a yes answer, you go to a counter and you borrow 600 NT. And then when you feel that you've had some luck, you go back within 1 year and you pay back double. You pay back 1,200 NT. If the first time the divination blocks say no, you throw them again. If they say yes, you can borrow 500 NT, etc., etc., etc. You're only allowed to throw them 6 times. And the probability is 1 in 64 of not being able to borrow some money from the temple. And the manager explained that if after 6 times the gods say no, you're basically going to have a bad year. Someone's going to die in your family, you're going to lose your family business, you're screwed, basically. That was his actual word, I think. So, let's see if this works. Hopefully this works. I made a very short film of it. But it's hard to imagine what it's like unless you actually see it. It's got a very carnivalesque atmosphere. Yes.
Just that I get this right, the temple doesn't just bless the money of the people, but he borrows them his own money, like a bank, right?
You see it on this film.
Okay.
You go to the temple, you say to the god, will you lend me money? The god says yes. You go up to a counter, say the god said yes. Can I have 600 NT? You give them your ID card, they take down your name and address. They won't chase you, but just to stop someone coming every day and borrowing money. And they literally just give you 600 NT. And they trust you, or they trust your fear or superstition, that if you don't return it, you'll get bad luck, for people to return and give back double. I went there with my girlfriend, who you'll see, and I couldn't believe my eyes. I thought she was just coming there to help with my research. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? She's standing at the counter and going 800 NT. But she borrowed money last year, I didn't know. And she was going back with me because she wanted to pay interest. I was like, what the hell are you doing now? visitors every day, and I was there for an hour. There were probably 300 or 400 people there, and more people coming and going all the time. So this is a very Taiwan phenomenon. This one is actually really close to here. If you have a motor scooter, it's about 30 minutes drive from Taipei on Road 106, so not the Money God Temple. Everything is decorated in the shape of traditional Chinese money. Even the banister rails are supported by little Chinese traditional money shapes. Slightly different system there. You have gods of 5 directions, and you go there and you ask one of the gods if they'll give you lucky money. And if the god says yes, you take 20 NT, and when you feel you've had luck, you go back and you pay with interest. Most people pay 100 or 200 or 1000 NT. This is the actual system and how it works, and I'll let you read through that. So in the first temple, you have to return the money within a year. This one, you can return it after 7 days. And I interviewed quite a lot of people there. My first question is this your first visit? And almost nobody, it was their first visit. People were coming back 4 or 5 times a year. They'll borrow 20 NT, get some luck, and go back and pay back 1,000. Get another 20 NT, etc., etc., etc. Obviously it works. Otherwise people wouldn't keep paying back with interest. The most recent one is in Taichung, Tiangong. A guy called Mr. Zhang bought it in 2006 after he had a dream. In fact, all 3 of these temples started with different people having dreams. It's very biblical. A lot of religious things start from dreams. And Mr. Zhang was an estate agent, and his job was looking at properties that were up for auction. And he had a dream that he should buy a temple, and that week this temple came up for auction, and so he bought it. When he bought it, there was a small bowl of coins at the front of the temple, which is very common, underneath the altar where the tiger god lives. And anyone could come along and put in a few coins and take some out. There would be lucky coins. What makes this temple system special is he introduced what he calls a 168 system. With this particular temple, you don't have to, people don't wait for luck to return the money. Very, very simply speaking, you go in there and you borrow 168 NT from the temple, and in return you give them double. Very simple. Like you go and get your lucky money and you go and give them 336 NT or whatever it is. Just make the exchange. And this money is supposed to bring you good luck. In 2008 it was on TV, it became quite a phenomenon. And the owner claims that they have up to 1 million visits a year. So they're making quite a lot of money, profit out of this. What I like is the main deity, WHEI-MING, who's the god of wealth. The owner of the temple claims that his deity is Tang Dynasty. I sent the photograph of this deity to a few archaeologists now and said, is this Tang Dynasty? And they laughed at me. I don't really know how old it is, it's probably 1970s. It's a lovely statue. So a very similar system. You introduce yourself to the deities, you throw the guavei. If they say yes, you pay 360 NT, and you get 168 in return. If they say no, you keep throwing until they say yes. But each time you throw again, you have to raise the amount of money that you're going to pay. So instead of 360, you might say, I'll give you 460 for lucky money. If it's no, I'll give you 560 until you get a yes. And then you get yourself some lucky money. And this is the explanation of how they arrived at 168. short film to give you a feeling for the temple. This is an example of one of the many exports, religious exports from Taiwan. Others include a giant puppet called San Taizi, who's a deity that dances to techno music, and is now popular in Singapore and becoming popular in Malaysia and other places where you have Chinese communities. You might have seen the giant puppets in procession. That's another Taiwanese invention that's now becoming popular in mainland China and in Singapore. So Taiwan's actually building up a whole plethora of religious exports that have originated in Taiwan, including the strippers and the pole dancers for deities. All of this is now expanding throughout Southeast Asia, which is, someone should write a PhD about that sometime. It'd be a really interesting topic. Okay, any questions on this?
I'm curious with these money temples, they have so much cash coming through there. What kind of arrangements do they make for security?
I really didn't ask. I don't think anyone in Taiwan would rob money from a temple. It would bring the wrath of the gods. It just wouldn't happen. And Taiwan's a safe place anyway, but stealing from a temple, wouldn't happen.
Are they exempt from taxes and whatnot?
I don't know if they're exempt from taxes. That's another thing that would be interesting to find out. I know that temples do have some tax breaks. I'm not sure exactly what they are. All of the temples claim to do various things for local charities or national charities, but basically they're money-making ventures. Okay, how are we going for time? What time are we?
It's about half hour.
About half an hour. Okay, good. Okay, so spirit mediums. Spirit mediums, also known as donkey. The idea of a spirit medium is that when you go to a temple and you want to ask something to a deity, you use the divination blocks, and that gives you a restriction. Divination blocks, you can only ask a yes or no question. What if your question isn't yes or no? What if you need some practical advice?
I know that there are other devices at the temples that you can use. For example, the barrel with the sticks.
Yeah, that's also using divination blocks. You have a barrel with bamboo sticks with numbers. You shake them until one comes out. And you throw the divination block to say, is this the right one for me? And if you get a yes answer, you then go to a tray of small boxes. You take out from the box with the same number a little slip of paper with something written in a riddle that isn't direct advice, it's something very openly interpretable. If you don't understand it, there's usually someone available at a counter who will try and explain what it means and you relate it to your life. It's a bit like tarot reading. So yes, you do have that. You also have what's called a divination chair, which is something, it's a small chair about this big, controlled by two people, and you'd use it for more serious things. You make an appointment, and in theory a deity enters a chair, guides the chair, and it writes on a table in characters. Once again, in theory, the people operating it should be illiterate, so they can't fake the writing. You have a literate person observing to read and note down the characters. Neither of them, however, is convenient to the spirit medium. As a spirit medium, you can go up to, you can say, hello Jigong, drunken monk, hello Natsu, hello Wang Ya, all of the main deities, apart from the Jet Emperor and the Buddha and Lao Tzu, all of the other mid to high level deities can be transferred through spirit mediums. And you literally go there and ask them a question and you can have a conversation. You could say, I have a problem with my child, he doesn't work very hard at school, or I'm worried about my job or my studies, what should I do? And the spirit medium will give you advice. You can go, do you mean this? Or do you mean this? Or should I do it like this or like this? And they can tell you. And so this is one of the reasons spirit mediums are so popular. You can go there for advice. They offer healing services. If you're ill, they'll do different kinds of healing, either by giving you a talisman to consume, sometimes hands-on healing, sometimes they do magic rituals for healing. There's actually a very, very, very big spirit medium culture. I would say 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 temples has a spirit medium operating from it. Spirit mediums date back to around the time of Confucius, when the emperor himself would have had an official exorcist who would go through the streets exorcising demons from the streets. And he would do this with a sword and a whip, with drums and dancing. And the descriptions in very, very early Chinese history books written in China are very, very similar to what the modern spirit medium performs when going into a trance or doing an exorcism as well. So it's a very, very, very old tradition that's come into the modern age, hardly changing. Yeah, Jigong the Drunken Monk. He is one of the most popular spirit mediums in Taiwan because you can joke with him. Some deities are very serious and some are very jovial, and Jigong is very, very, very jovial. The original Jigong was a historical character, I think it was 12th century, and his parents died when he was young, and he went to live in a monastery. And he was a gifted healer, but he was expelled from the monastery because he liked drinking and because he ate meat and things like this. The reason I've included these 3 particular photographs is because they were all taken at the same time, within 30 seconds of each other. So I'm standing here, and there's one Jigong medium, her, standing here, this guy walking towards me over there, and the other one walking towards me where you are. I'm like, wow, this is interesting. Click, click, click. If they are all Jigong, they don't need to talk to each other. Like if I met myself, I wouldn't need to speak to myself because I'm myself, I know what I'm thinking already. And of course the 3 of them got together and started having a great chat about the meaning of life and about the procession and about the pig and about all kinds of other things. And so I was trying to figure out, like, how is this working? Is the soul divisible? Does the soul divide into different parts, and different parts of the soul go into different Jigongs? I didn't actually find out until I started my current research on spirit mediums. And every time I meet a Jigong medium, I've met quite a lot, My first question is, which Qigong are you? Are you the original Qigong, or are you another one? And only one of them was the original. All the rest said, no, I'm a representative. And the way the system works is someone in their lifetime was a devotee of Qigong, or owned a Qigong temple, or Qigong saved their life and they worshipped Qigong, they had any strong relationship. After death, instead of being born again, the person is given the option of serving Qigong, living in heaven and serving Qigong. And these will come down to the different spirit mediums for consultation. So they're not the original Qigong. And that's how the spirit medium system works. You can have 1,000 Qigong mediums who will actually be a different person. So none of them will be the original Qigong. It's quite interesting.
The guy who told you that he was the original one, was he different than what he saw?
So he was trancing one of the representatives of Qigong, and it was quite an interesting consultation because there was a girl, she was big and butch and mean, and her parents couldn't control her. She was, I think, 19 or 20 years old, and her parents had brought her to the temple, and she had been first giving all her money to her boyfriend, who was obviously a really bad guy, a dodgy guy, and then she started stealing her parents' money to give to the boyfriend, and then she started gambling, got in debt, and started taking the family possessions and selling them. She'd gone completely out of control. And so the parents and her friends had persuaded her to go to this spirit medium temple to consult the spirit medium to try and sort out this social problem. Spirit mediums tend to sort out a lot of social problems as well as medical problems, whatever. And at one point in the interview, she just turned around and she punched her father. And the father fell on the floor with like blood running down his nose. And the Qigong just said, I can't deal with this. Said to the girl, I can't deal with this, I'm gonna leave, I'm gonna go and get the real Qigong to come down here and sort you out. And so the representative left the spirit medium, went back to wherever he came from. The spirit medium went back in trance and the original Qigong came. It was actually quite frightening. The guy was formidable. His whole body posture changed, his body language changed, his voice changed. He was angry, and the girl couldn't argue with him. And she ended up on her knees, swearing to obey her father, offering her parents tea, which is what you do to show respect, offering Qigong tea. And Qigong adopted her as a goddaughter and said, if you misbehave, I'm coming for you. There's nothing you can do about it. And he was formidable. He was scary. It was one of the most convincing spirit mediums I've ever seen.
How come the woman's costume is a different color?
I don't think it's significant, it's just symbolic. The reason they have patches of colour is because the original Qigong was a vagabond, so his clothes would have been ripped and patched up with any material he could find. It's more like a uniform. Spirit medium uniforms are so the public can recognise immediately who it is. Oh, that's Qigong. Oh, that's Santaizo, that's Kuan Yin. It makes them very recognisable, so people know what kind of questions they can ask them and know what to expect from the medium. There's no specific reason you should wear black, not yellow. It would be personal preference. Okay, and the very, very last thing I want to talk about is the Ling-Ji phenomena. I'll let you have a read through this and I'll give you a bit more detail. Okay, so this was written back in 2003, and the Ling-Ji, I call it a phenomenon really, has just expanded so fast. I would say 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 temples in Taiwan now has a Ling-Ji group practicing from that temple. Both of these temples are less than 4 minutes scooter drive from where I live. I'm living down on Xinyilu, section 6, right at the end. This one's actually on Xinyilu, and this is people practicing their Lingji practice in the middle of the road on one of their festivals. And this is on Songshanlu. And this temple's fascinating. They're having a ceremony at the moment, which is a medicine ceremony. And every day for 24 days, they're making 36 medicines. And the medicines are for dead people. They're for ancestors, they're for spirits, specifically dedicated to past emperors of China. The idea being that because they were emperors of China, they're obviously responsible for more deaths than anybody else. Therefore, their soul needs more healing. And they make these medicines, as you can see in the pots along here, and by various altars and chanting, and this is practicing Lingji, they charge and fortify the medicines to make them stronger, to give them spiritual essence, and any spirits are welcome to come along for healing. It's very, very bizarre. Lingji, they tend to belch a lot. And this is apparently getting rid of negative energy, getting rid of negative chi energy. And after they finish belching, they're very often going to spontaneous movements. Like some of the ladies do dancing, the guys start doing like kung fu, and other people do like tai chi kind of things and whatever. And it's at more advanced levels, they will be speaking in tongues, same as in Christians speaking in tongues. And the goal of Lingji, they believe that everyone has an original spirit. The goal is to allow it to be animated by deities outside of you to help it heal and help you heal other people. At the very highest levels, it helps people claim they can see spirits. They claim to remember all of their past lives, etc., etc., etc. from this practice.
What is the yin-yang science to do with share the love, right?
This particular festival is run by a temple which claims to be a Taoist temple, and the yin-yang symbol is a Taoist symbol, and so is the bagua with the trigrams. All of this is actually made of traditional Chinese herbs, apart from the center, which is made of 2 different kinds of rice, black rice and brown rice. There's 5 other temples attending the ritual as an Aboriginal group, who are quite funny. You'll see why. I'll show you a video I shot 2 days ago. There's a Buddhist temple that does Buddhist chanting every day, and 3 other Taoist temples. But the common link between them is everyone in these temples practices this Lingji together. Okay, show you a quick video of that, then one more lot of questions, and we'll finish. Whoops. That didn't do it quite right. Sorry, folks. didn't add the music afterwards. This was actually recorded live. What was actually happening there at the time. It was very, very, very bizarre.
What temple is this?
So Songshan of Yaoshigong. So it's on Songshan. This is practicing Lingji, fortifying the medicines. They don't dance there every day, it's just a special day.
When?
Well, the festival's finishing, so it's just one of the special days at the end of the festival. This guy is their head priest.
Does she work at the temple?
This lady is the owner of the temple. The lady in red is with the Aboriginal group. The lady in the gold is a Lingji teacher. And this is us adding energy to the medicines, and the medicines are in the cooking pots.
So the original group came all the way from their home to this place.
They're from Hualien. All the temples are from different places and all camped there for a couple of weeks. They've got a little temple on the hill above the main temple. So the Jade Emperor, this is a view of the main temple. And all the dancing is going on about 100 meters down. Beautiful view. questions on Lingji?
Not on this one, but which of the temples in Taipei have spirit mediums, and when would it be possible to see one?
I would say 1 in 5 temples in Taipei has a spirit medium, and you'd have to go there and just ask if they have a spirit medium and find out what the consultations are.
Yeah, I wouldn't exactly want to consult one. I'd just like to see spirits.
Same applies, because when you spirit medium, I don't find people standing there and watching.
That music that they were dancing to just now, is it religious or
I would love to know what it is. I recognize it. It sounds like something from South America. I just got no idea what it is.
that any taxi driver plays in?
It could. I've got absolutely no idea. It's what they chose to play. It was a very, very bizarre evening. It was an evening taken over by the Aboriginal group, and they're not traditional Aborigines. They developed their own kind of religious belief systems, similar systems. They've even modified the traditional costume. The monks doing their chanting are not your typical monks, because they'll practice the Lingji practice as well. It just had a very, very nice atmosphere.
And is the priest a full-time priest, or does he have another job?
Which one?
The one, the last one was...
Oh, the guy with the lovely long white beard.
Fingernails.
I've only ever seen him there in the evenings. I think he lives at the temple. I don't know if he has another job or not. I think he's retired. And he's a pretty old guy. I think he's retired by now. It's a nice temple. There's so many Lingji temples, all very happy if a Western or a local person comes along and says, hey, I want to find out, can I join in? They're very happy to. I've been to at least 4 where they just said, yeah, come on, do some Lingji practice. I'm like, okay, let's do it. Okay, well, I hope that interested you. Taiwan's an amazing place. There's some incredible religious culture, some beautiful temples, Lingji mediums, spirit mediums, processions, it's all there. So hopefully that's inspired you to go and take a look at some. Okay, thank you. Nice meeting you.
Thank you.